Spinning TV.
You. Now to
What is going on? How we doing? All right, so I wanted to get on here and talk about the debate last night. Excuse me. But talk about the debate last night and see if there's any updates on any like P. Diddy case or current events. All right. Guess first thing I found a video because they are finding out now there's some non-citizens who happen to be all of a suddenly registered to vote. Goes against what all the Democrats have been saying, unless it was 2016 when Hillary Clinton you know said that the election was rigged. So I'm not saying it is or isn't. Well, maybe I'm saying it is because you know what? I feel like it's been rigged for years. So, but that's my personal opinion. So I found this video earlier about this guy who got registered to vote, and he's not a U.S. citizen. He's lived here for a while because he's on a work visa, but he says he's like, I never registered to vote or anything. I don't know how this accidentally happened, but I wanted to show this video real quick. It's about a 5-minute video, and then we can kind of have a little talk about it. Switched over to the screen here. All right, I'll go ahead and get this plan.
To Decision 2024 and our continuing reporting on the data glitch that impacted nearly 98,000 voters in Arizona. On Friday, we told you that the Arizona Supreme Court had ruled that these voters will be able to vote a full ballot in November.
Still, there's this question. How many of those people aren't actually eligible or shouldn't be eligible? 12 News journalist Sean Rice spoke to one man who said he never should have been able to register in the first place. Sean?
Yeah, Mark and Caribe, we've learned the Maricopa County Recorder's Office first found out about this problem after learning that someone who is not a United States citizen was actually registered to vote. Now, in this email from the county recorder, Stephen Richer, to the Secretary of State, Adrian Fontes, and Governor Katie Hobbs, Richer says it should have been impossible for that person to be registered since he is not a United States citizen. Now a man has sharing his own emails describing his shock when he found out he was registered to vote, even though he's not a citizen either. And he says elections officials here in Maricopa County have turned a blind eye to all of it.
And I specified that I was a U.S. resident, not a citizen, and that I had received a voter ID card, and I don't think it was right.
Caught off guard.
See, right there in the beginning, he received a voter ID card. That seems a little suspicious when you know you're not a citizen, and I praise this guy for that, for coming forward and saying like, hey, I don't know why I got this. I'm not a citizen.
Luke Lehman said he never registered to vote, but then he got this voter education guide in the mail. And then he got this voter identification card, labeling him as a registered voter with no political party affiliation. The catch is that Lehman's is not a United States citizen.
That's not right. I want to know what's going on, and I want to basically cancel my registration.
He's been living in Arizona since the 1980s on a green card sponsored by his employer.
So 1980s, this guy's been here almost as long as I've been alive, okay? And recently, all of a sudden, he's getting registered to vote.
Based in Belgium. Lehman's doesn't recall ever willingly registering to vote, and he didn't vote in either the 2022 or 2024 elections.
I wasn't worried about it from my personal perspective. Okay, I didn't vote, and I did my best to get me off the registration.
Connecting the dots, he thinks this must have all happened after he renewed his driver's license when he turned 65. That was back in 2021. His date of registration on his voter ID card is the exact same as the date he was issued a new driver's license. Lehman's provided copies of an email he sent to the Maricopa County Recorder's Office back in August. He asked, why did this happen? Adding that he's concerned he's not the only one. Then he filled out this form last month to cancel his voter registration, again asking, why did I get registered to vote in the first place?
When you would pull up the signed form in their own handwriting, oftentimes people forget.
Tammy Patrick is the former federal compliance officer for the Maricopa County Elections Department. She says it's entirely possible with the online system he could have erroneously checked yes to being a United States citizen 3 years ago, allowing him to appear on the voter rolls.
So we need to make sure that the system is set up in such a way that it makes sure that the voters are really aware of what the transaction is that they're taking place with.
12 News began asking the Maricopa County Recorder Stephen Richer's office a series of questions on September 19th. Those included how Luke Lehman's became registered to vote after he renewed his driver's license, and how many other non-citizens may be erroneously registered because of this same issue. A spokesperson declined to answer until the investigation into the coding error is completed.
That is something that is worth investigating, how that happened.
I think that it really makes sense to double check, not knowing exactly how it was set up, if it was just carrying forward all the old information, or if it was somehow set up to automatically populate information. Those are the sorts of things that you would want to understand.
Some answers to our questions lie in Luke Lehman's voter records. We've requested those records, but have not received them. Luke also asked for his own records.
I am frustrated to the fact that even if I give permission for somebody to get the records, that permission is basically ignored, and that I had to come here in person to actually receive another form that maybe will be handled the same way.
Patrick says a record does exist showing whether Lehman said if he was a citizen or not.
If that PDF is checked off, no, I'm not a citizen.
Hold on, I gotta stop it there because it should be pretty obvious. If you filled out a simple form, I've done FOIAs at different places between DHS, the courthouse, a few different places, okay? Depending on variables, obviously, it can take some time, but I have never had it take very long. Like, it's usually pretty prompt unless it's something they really don't want to share, and then it's like they'll take their maximum amount of time. But like, yeah, you could go to like CPS, get a FOIA of people or whatever. They'll redact obviously certain personal information, but it's typically pretty quick. Within 30 days, you can go back and pick up, whatever you requested. Sometimes it could take longer if the cases are really old, but this case is like literally 4 years. Like, check, did you fill out this thing? That should be a, really quick and easy thing to get a hold of.
Citizen, then it should have stopped.
And without that confirmation, concerns over how many non-citizens are getting registered to vote will stay unaddressed.
If there's any way that as a result of this, okay, there was some illegal things going on, okay, then I'm happy that I did this.
We have also...
Right, I stand for that right there. That's pretty awesome. He's like, I didn't register. He's being honest. He's telling you, like, and this just brings light, like, okay, now we need to do some requests. They're requesting some information, see how long it takes them to get back to you. Then you'll kind of have a good idea on whether they're going to be honest or they're going to try to cover up and hide stuff. Because like I watch a lot of these like auditors and stuff. They try to like record township meetings, and the Supreme Court already ruled they can't stop you from recording a public meeting. It's a public meeting on public property, and yet these townships constantly are trying to kick people out from recording because they always have something that's not right. Like it's it could be launderings, a little bit of money. It could be like the one guy that I'm sure everybody's seen the video on YouTube, but the guy was calling out. I think it was the mayor and another official had bought a $1,200 suit on taxpayer money and certain things that they weren't supposed to, and he had all the paperwork. So it's kind of like we need to really be checking our government. I know a few situations locally where some like property lines are becoming issues because one person has this, they had it surveyed one way and another person had it surveyed another way. And then if you go through like the old township records, it even shows like the property was this way at a certain time, but as it progresses from like the 1920s all the way up, that property all of a sudden changed, and there's no records of any changing. All the numbers and all the latitude, longitude, all your dimensions, all this stuff was exactly the same, but from the early 1900s all the way up till today, and I want to say it was the 70s or 80s where it had a big move. Like they even moved the road over pretty far, and it's cutting into property, and it's it's crazy stuff. But somehow you can pay a surveyor to survey your property a little bigger, and if there's nobody contests it, then it changes in the township. The township doesn't really investigate. Really should check into stuff. All right, let's see. But I wanted to get into that debate last night. I wanted to have a little conversation about that, and because honestly, I was kind of surprised all the way around. Like, I thought they were both pretty polite to each other. I honestly thought that the moderators did way better in this VP debate than they did in the presidential debate. And so I just really kind of got surprised. I was expecting it to be kind of similar to the presidential debate. I mean, I guess it kind of was, because they did, they tried to do a little bit of fact checking when they said they weren't going to fact check, or they were going to wait for, the candidate to ask for the fact checking. And it's like they always do it incorrectly, or, they have to put some perspective in it instead of some facts. But in my opinion, I thought J.D. Vance won. I thought he did phenomenal, surprising, better than I thought. Tim Walz, I thought he had points where he was good, like especially when he was talking about the housing. because everybody's like, oh, it's the migrants, and I get that has something to do with it because, again, they're getting money from the government to pay for their housing, and people are like, yeah, guaranteed money from the government, which is kind of like why a lot of landlords prefer the people with Section 8 over other people, because it's a guaranteed paycheck every month. They ain't got to worry about it. So when you bring in migrants and they have, we'll give $1,000 a month, whatever, for your housing, a landlord's going to be like, yeah, we'll move these people out who are late every once in a while. They struggle a bit. They can get kicked out, and we'll take that money, steady money, right? So that does drive it up. Don't get me wrong. However, it does not create a bigger problem that we have. I mean, it's really hard to tell because there's so many variables to it. So I just wanted to kind of have a conversation about it. Who watched the debate last night? Comment, let me know. I'm going to try to find and read some comments here. Oh, look, I got a violation warning. Your live is flagged for civic and election integrity. Repeated violations could result in your live being disconnected. The only thing that I have shown on here was factual data. There was no perspective. There was nothing that was, you can't even argue it because it's what happened. So I'm not sure why I'm getting flagged there, but hey, you know what? Suppression of free speech, right? And then it gives me a little thing. Learn more about the U.S. elections. I mean, I've been here my whole life. I've voted ever since I was 18. I know quite a bit about the election, right? It's funny how they sit here and they try to tell you like, oh, we may disrupt your life. Let me know. Am I still on? Am I still here? That kind of kills me. All right. I'm trying to get to this other video. My apologies. Let's see. Yeah, sorry, I'm not watching any ABC. I didn't really care for how they handled the presidential. And I'm not, I'm not big on Fox. I'm not big on CNN. All these mainstreams just kind of. It's like you got to watch them because a lot of times they get that little insider, scoop, so you get little details. So you kind of got to watch them all. But just because I watch one doesn't mean, like that's my main source, because I got tons of sources, tons of, most of my stuff is going to be independent sources. I see, yes, LMAO, right? Isn't it crazy? We watch a video where a non-citizen accidentally got registered and they flag you. Factual data. All right. Well, here, let's the must-watch moments and analysis of the vice presidential debate on CNN. Screw it. Let's watch CNN.
I'm Nora O'Donnell.
Oh, hold on. I got to transition the screen. I know. I got it. I got you. All right, transition. Here we go.
Thank you for joining us for tonight's CBS News Vice Presidential Debate. We want to welcome our viewers on CBS, on other networks here in the U.S. and around the world. Governor, Senator, thank you for joining us. Let's get started.
Earlier today, Iran launched its largest attack yet on Israel, but that attack failed, thanks to joint U.S. and Israeli defensive action. President Biden has deployed more than 40,000 U.S. military personnel and assets to that region.
All right, let me pause here. Kamala just said, remember in her debate, she said we do not have any active duty soldiers. If you watched my last live, I played the soldiers that were in the area watching that debate are like, dude, who are we? Where are we at? Like, they're soldiers in active duty in an active war zone. Sorry, debunked.
Region over the past year to try to prevent a regional war. Iran is weakened, but the U.S. still considers it the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, and it has drastically reduced the time it would take to develop a nuclear weapon. It is down now to 1 or 2 weeks' time.
And I got to pause it again because we obviously start with the Iran nuclear thing. All right, now, anybody knew about the Iran nuclear deal back in Obama days? And, part of my job at the time was to read legislation and to pass information along, okay? I was involved in a pretty big organization, pretty big group, and that was one of my tasks, was I actually had to read the legislation. It took a long time. It was like 165 pages. And, sometimes you got to sit there with a dictionary. I'm not a 160 IQ, so, I'm not a super genius here. I mean, I know enough. So, the Iran nuclear deal, for one, allowed Iran to run plutonium and enrich uranium to weapons grade. It also did not tell them where they had to store it, but it did tell them that each facility they built could at least run at least one weapons grade. So basically, it allowed them to create nuclear weapons. And then it also had a little piece in there that said if you abide by this, you can even make a ballistic missile, intercontinental ballistic missile. They were allowed to do that. According to the legislation that said we had confirmation, no American was allowed in. No, and you had to apply 30 days. The IMF had to apply 30 days in advance and could get told no to inspect any of these nuclear facilities. It gave them permission to run weapons-grade plutonium, and then it never told them where they had to store it, how they had to store it, if they, it didn't specify. It was very, loophole-y. Iran could basically build a nuclear weapon, and they probably have one. I'm sure they do, and they're just not using it yet. They're waiting. But we'll see. I mean, that's all, perspective and stuff that I've read. Here we go.
Governor Walz, if you were the final voice in the Situation Room, would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you. And thank you for those joining at home tonight. Let's keep in mind where this started. October 7th, Hamas terrorists massacred over 1,400 Israelis and took prisoners. Israel's ability to be able to defend itself is absolutely fundamental. Getting its hostages back, fundamental, and ending the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. But the expansion of Israel and its proxies is an absolute fundamental necessity for the United States to have the steady leadership there. You saw it experienced today, where along with our Israeli partners and our coalition, able to stop the incoming attack. But what's fundamental here is that steady leadership is going to matter. It's clear, and the world saw it on that debate stage a few weeks ago. A nearly 80-year-old Donald Trump talking about crowd sizes is not what we need in this moment. But it's not just that. It's those that were closest to Donald Trump that understand how dangerous he is when the world is this dangerous. His chief of staff, John Kelly, said that he was the most flawed human being he'd ever met. And both of his secretaries of defense and his national security advisors said he should be nowhere near the White House. Now, the person closest to them, Donald Trump, said he's unfit for the highest office. That was Senator Vance. What we've seen out of Vice President Harris is we've seen steady leadership. We've seen a calmness that is able to draw on the coalitions to bring them together. Understanding that our allies matter. When our allies see Donald Trump turn towards Vladimir Putin, turn towards North Korea, when we start to see that type of fickleness around holding the coalitions together, we will stay committed. And as the Vice President said today we will protect our forces and our allied forces, and there will be consequences.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, the same question. Would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
So, Margaret, I want to answer the question. First of all, thanks, Governor. Thanks to CBS for hosting the debate. And thanks, most importantly, to the American people who are watching this evening and caring enough about this country to pay attention to this vice presidential debate. I want to answer the question, but I want to actually give an introduction to myself a little bit because I recognize a lot of Americans don't know who either one of us are. I was raised in a working class family. My mother required food assistance for periods of her life. My grandmother required Social Security help to raise me, and she raised me in part because my own mother struggled with addiction for a big chunk of my early life. I went to college on the GI Bill after I enlisted in the Marine Corps and served in Iraq. And so I stand here asking to be your vice president with extraordinary gratitude for this country, for the American dream that made it possible for me to live my dreams. And most importantly, I know that a lot of you are worried about the chaos in the world and the feeling that the American dream is unattainable. I want to try to convince you tonight over the next 90 minutes that if we get better leadership in the White House, if we get Donald Trump back in the White House, the American dream is going to be attainable once again. Now, to answer this particular question, we have to remember that as much as Governor Walz just accused Donald Trump of being an agent of chaos, Donald Trump actually delivered stability in the world, and he did it by establishing effective deterrence. People were afraid of stepping out of line. Iran, which launched this attack, has received over $100 billion in unfrozen assets thanks to the Kamala Harris administration. What do they use that money for? They use it to buy weapons that they're now launching against our allies, and God forbid, potentially launching against the United States as well. Donald Trump recognized that for people to fear the United States, you needed peace through strength. They needed to recognize that if they got out of line, the United States global leadership would put stability and peace back in the world. Now, you asked about a preemptive strike, Margaret, and I want to answer the question. Look, it is up to Israel what they think they need to do to keep their country safe, and we should support our allies wherever they are when they're fighting the bad guys. I think that's the right approach to take with the Israel question.
Senator Vance, your campaign.
What do you think? I mean, right there, I think it's funny because I think he pulled a Kamala there. He had to go on and, I'm middle class, right? But anywho, obviously what I get out of this is he's basically saying, well, Iran's the one who was attacked, so Iran should be deciding how they react. And I mean, I think America would do the same thing, right? If we were attacked, we would respond and we would take care of the problem or do our best to take care of the problem. So, I mean, so far, so good.
Campaign is pledging to carry out the largest mass deportation plan in American history and to use the U.S. military to do so. Could you be more specific about exactly how this will work? For example, would you deport parents who have entered the U.S. illegally and separate them from any of their children who were born on U.S. soil? You have 2 minutes.
So first of all, Margaret, before we talk about deportations, we have to stop the bleeding. We have a historic immigration crisis because Kamala Harris started and said that she wanted to undo all of Donald Trump's border policies. 94 executive orders suspending deportations, decriminalizing illegal aliens, massively increasing the asylum fraud that exists in our system. That has opened the floodgates. And what it's meant is that a lot of fentanyl is coming into our country. I had a mother who struggled with opioid addiction and has gotten clean. I don't want people who are struggling with addiction to be deprived of their second chance because Kamala Harris let in fentanyl into our communities at record levels. So you've got to stop the bleeding. You've got to re-implement Donald Trump's border policies, build the wall, re-implement deportations. And that gets me to your point, Margaret, about what do we actually do? So we've got 25 million illegal aliens who are here in the country. What do we do with them? I think the first thing that we do is we start with the criminal migrants. About 1 million of those people have committed some form of crime in addition to crossing the border illegally. I think you start with deportations on those folks. And then I think you make it harder for illegal aliens to undercut the wages of American workers. A lot of people will go home if they can't work for less than minimum wage in our own country. And by the way, that'll be really good for our workers who just want to earn a fair wage for doing a good day's work. And the final point, Margaret, is you ask about family separation. Right now in this country, Margaret, we have 320,000 children that the Department of Homeland Security has effectively lost. Some of them have been sex trafficked. Some of them hopefully are at homes with their families. Some of them have been used as drug trafficking mules. The real family separation policy in this country is unfortunately Kamala Harris's wide open southern border. And I'd ask my fellow Americans to remember when she came into office, she said she was going to do this. Real leadership would be saying, you know what, I screwed up. We're going to go back to Donald Trump's border policies. I wish that she would do that. It would be good for all of us.
I agree.
Governor,
very much.
do you
so.
care to respond to any of those specific allegations, including that the vice president is, quote, letting in fentanyl and using kids as drug mules, among other things regarding children.
The drug mule is not true, but I will say about this, about the fentanyl, because this is a crisis of this, the opioid crisis. And the good news on this is the last 12 months saw the largest decrease in opioid deaths in our nation's history, 30% decrease in Ohio, but there's still more work to do. But let's go back to this on immigration. Kamala Harris was the Attorney General of the largest state and a border state in California. She's the only person in this race who prosecuted transnational gangs for human trafficking and drug interventions. But look, we all want to solve this. Most of us want to solve this, and that is the United States Congress. That's the Border Patrol agents. That's the Chamber of Commerce. That's most Americans out here. That's why we had the fairest and the toughest bill on immigration.
Okay, pause there. Now, if anybody went and actually read the legislation on the bill, Tim Walz is going to go through and he's going to say all these things, and they're not really going to be 100% true. Now, most of that bill was actually about changing definitions, and the changing in the definitions that they did actually allowed more people to come here technically legally, which Vance will explain kind of towards the end. But there was another way, was they come over here legally as immigrants because all they had to do was fill out this application saying we seek asylum, and they automatically, with a magic wand, are allowed in. Like, no background check, no processing, no nothing. Just, hey, say you're fleeing a country of war or whatever, you're asylum seeker. Just say it and you're in automatically. We don't even look. We don't care. Yeah, I don't think so.
This nation's seen. It was crafted by a conservative senator from Oklahoma, James Lankford. I know him. He's super conservative, but he's a man of principle, wants to get it done. Democrats and Republicans worked on this piece of legislation. The Border Patrol said, this is what we need in here. These are the experts. And the Chamber of Commerce and the Wall Street Journal said, pass this thing. Kamala Harris helped get there. 1,500 new border agents, detection for drugs, DOJ money to speed up these the adjudications on this, just what America wants. But as soon as I was getting ready to pass and actually tackle this, Donald Trump said no, told them to vote against it because it gives him a campaign issue. It gives him what would Donald Trump talk about if we actually did some of these things? And they need to be done by the legislature. You can't just do this through the executive branch. So look, we have the options to do this. Donald Trump
and I'm not sure if they're going to let Vance respond or they'll show his response, but the fact of the matter is we already have laws. So yes, the executive branch can say, hey, enforce these laws, because that's my job as the president, is to ensure that you're enforcing the law, right? So it's very much the president's job to make sure that, Border Patrol is doing its job and not just allowing whoever to come in whenever. And again, I'm not against immigration at all. What I'm against is smuggling, human trafficking, all the negative and bad things that happen. So, yeah.
He had 4 years. He had 4 years to do this. And he promised you, America, how easy it would be. I'll build you a big, beautiful wall, and Mexico will pay for it. Less than 2% of that wall got built, and Mexico didn't pay a dime. But here we are again, 9 years after he came down that escalator, dehumanizing people and telling him what he was going to do. As far as the deportation plan, at one point, Senator Vance said it was so unworkable to be laughable. So that's where we're at. Pass the bill, she'll sign it.
Governor Walz, you said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy?
Yeah, well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400, town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on, and I'm proud of that service. I joined the National Guard at 17, worked on family farms, and then I used the GI Bill.
Notice he's like, oh crap, busted in a lie. Now let me go tell about all the good stuff I did and ignore the lie. No, you straight up lied, bro, and you also didn't carry weapons in war. We know this. Don't BS.
To become a teacher, passionate about it, a young teacher. My first year out, I got the opportunity in the summer of '89 to travel to China. 35 years ago, be able to do that. I came back home and then started a program to take young.
All right, well, let's just cut to the chase. What the event they're talking about happened in the spring April, May, right? He didn't get to go to China until after August. So you're talking half a year later, after everything's done with. So the answer is no, I was not there. Sorry, I lied. Let's move forward.
People there. We would take basketball teams, we would take baseball teams, we would take dancers, and we would go back and forth to China. The issue for that was to try and learn. Now look, my community knows who I am. They saw where I was at. Look, I will be the first to tell you, I have poured my heart into my community. I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect. And I'm a knucklehead at times, but it's always been about that. Those same people elected me to Congress for 12 years. And in Congress, I was one of the most bipartisan people, working on things like farm bills that we got done, working on veterans benefits. And then the people of Minnesota were able to elect me to governor twice. So look, my commitment has been from the beginning to make sure that I'm there for the people, to make sure that I get this right. I will say more than anything, many times I will talk a lot. I will get caught up in the rhetoric. But being there, the impact it made, the difference it made in my life, I learned a lot about China. I hear the critiques of this. I would make the case that Donald Trump should have come on one of those trips with us. I guarantee you he wouldn't be praising Xi Jinping about COVID. And I guarantee you he wouldn't start a trade war that he ends up losing. So this is about trying to understand the world. It's about trying to do the best you can for your community. And then it's putting yourself out there and letting your folks understand what it is. My commitment, whether it be through teaching, which I was good at, or whether it was being a good soldier or was being a good member of Congress, those are the things that I think are the values that people care about.
Governor, just to follow up on that, the question was, can you explain the discrepancy?
All I said on this is I got there that summer and misspoke on this.
You did not get there in the summer, though.
That's what I've said.
Oh, I just misspoke.
So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests, went in. And
see, now, he just actually lied again because the protest happened April, May. He didn't make it there till after August. So it sounds like he's trying to tell a story to be cool.
And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Thank you, Governor. Senator Vance, in 2016, you called your running mate Donald Trump unfit for the nation's highest office, and you said he could be America's Hitler. I know you've been asked many times, and you've said you regret those comments. All
right, now I'm going to tell you something too. I remember when Donald Trump announced he was going to run for president, I laughed my ass off. I didn't think he was serious. I took it as a joke, and at first I was like, no way, and then I heard all this media crap, and I was like, yeah, this guy's not cool, he can't be president. And then I actually sat down and listened to what he said. I listened to all of what he said, instead of just that 10-second clip that CNN, these people right here, CNN. Anyway, I listened to what they all said about him, and they said some bad stuff, and they took those little 10-second clips, and then when you went back and you actually watched the whole video, you were like, that's not racist. He's being honest. He's telling you what's happening. He's trying to tell you how to fix it. Yeah, no.
Explained you then voted for Donald Trump in 2020. But the Washington Post reported new messages last week in which you also disparaged Trump's economic record while he was president, writing to someone in 2020, quote, Trump thoroughly failed to deliver his economic populism. You're now his running mate, and you've shifted many of your policy stances to align with his. If you become vice president, why should Americans trust that you will give Donald Trump the advice he needs to hear and not just the advice he wants to hear? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Margaret, because I've always been open. And sometimes, of course, I've disagreed with the president, but I've also been extremely open about the fact that I was wrong about Donald Trump. I was wrong, first of all, because I believed some of the media stories that turned out to be dishonest fabrications of his record. But most importantly, Donald Trump delivered for the American people. Rising wages, rising take-home pay, an economy that worked for normal Americans, a secure southern border, a lot of things, frankly, that I didn't think he'd be able to deliver on. And yeah, when you screw up, when you misspeak, when you get something wrong and you change your mind, you ought to be honest with the American people about it. It's one of the reasons, Margaret, why I've done so many interviews, is because I think it's important to actually explain to the American people where I come down on the issues and what changed. Now, you pointed out to messages from 2020. Margaret, I've been extremely consistent that I think there were a lot of things that we could have done better in the Trump administration the first round if Congress was doing its job. I strongly believe, and I've been a United States Senator, that Congress is not just a high-class debating society. It's not just a forum for senators and congressmen to whine about problems. It's a forum to govern. So there were a lot of things on the border, on tariffs, for example, where I think that we could have done so much more if the Republican Congress and the Democrats in Congress had been a little bit better about how they govern the country. They were so obsessed with impeaching Donald Trump, they couldn't actually govern. And I want to talk about this tariff issue in particular, Margaret, because Tim just accused this of being a national sales tax. Look, the one thing, and you're probably surprised to hear me praising Joe Biden, but the one thing that Joe Biden did is he continued some of the Trump tariffs that protected American manufacturing jobs. And it's the one issue, the most pro-worker part of the Biden administration, it's the one issue where Kamala Harris has run away from Joe Biden's record. Think about this. If you're trying to employ slave laborers in China at $3 a day, you're going to do that and undercut the wages of American workers unless our country stands up for itself and says you're not accessing our markets unless you're paying middle-class Americans a fair wage.
After the 2020 election, President Trump's campaign and others filed 62 lawsuits contesting the results. Judges, including those appointed by President Trump and other Republican presidents, looked at the evidence and said there was no widespread fraud. The governors of every state in the nation, Republicans and Democrats, certified the 2020 election results and sent a legal slate of electors to Congress for January 6th. Senator Vance, you have said you would not have certified the last presidential election and would have asked the states to submit alternative electors. That has been called unconstitutional and illegal. Would you again seek to challenge this year's election results, even if every governor certifies the results? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, Nora, first of all, I think that we're focused on the future. We need to figure out how to solve the inflation crisis caused by Kamala Harris's policies, make housing affordable, make groceries affordable.
You know how you do that? Okay, first of all, because Biden decided to stop that pipeline right away, gas prices skyrocketed. We were so heavily invested, companies were so heavily already invested in people to build this pipeline. A lot of work was already done, a lot of permits, a lot of things were already done, and Joe Biden just cuts it. But then allows Russia to do Nord Stream. Think about that. Yeah.
And that's what we're focused on. But I want to answer your question because you did ask it. Look, what President Trump has said is that there were problems in 2020. And my own belief is that we should fight about those issues, debate those issues peacefully in the public square. And that's all I've said. And that's all that Donald Trump has said. Remember, he said that on January the 6th, the protesters ought to protest peacefully. And on January the 20th, what happened? Joe Biden became the president. Donald Trump left the White House. And now, of course, unfortunately, we have all of the negative policies that have come from the Harris-Biden administration. I believe that we actually do have a threat to democracy in this country, but unfortunately, it's not the threat to democracy that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz want to talk about. It is the threat of censorship. It's Americans casting aside lifelong friendships because of disagreements over politics. It's big technology companies silencing their fellow citizens. And it's Kamala Harris saying that rather than debate and persuade her fellow Americans, she'd like to censor people who engage in misinformation. I think that is a much bigger threat to democracy than anything that we've seen in this.
Right, because then you got to think, who gets to decide what is misinformation, right? Who gets to decide? And do you trust the person, right? Do you trust the person that gets to decide? I don't think so. You know, that's tough.
country in the last 4 years, in the last 40 years. Now, I'm really proud, especially given that I was raised by two lifelong blue-collar Democrats, to have the endorsement of Bobby Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, lifelong leaders in the Democratic coalition. And of course, they don't agree with me and Donald Trump on every issue. We don't have to agree on every issue, but we're united behind a basic American First Amendment principle that we ought to debate our differences. We ought to argue about them. We ought to try to persuade our fellow Americans. Kamala Harris is engaged in censorship at an industrial scale. She did it during COVID. She's done it over a number of other issues. And that, to me, is a much bigger threat to democracy than what Donald Trump said when he said that protesters should peacefully protest on January the 6th.
Governor?
Well, I've enjoyed tonight's debate, and I think there was a lot of commonality here. And I'm sympathetic to misspeaking on things, and I think I might have with the senator.
Me too, man.
There's one though that this one is troubling to me, and I say that because I think we need to tell the story. Donald Trump refused to acknowledge this, and the fact is that I don't think we can be the frog in the pot and let the boiling water go up. He was very clear. I mean, he lost this election, and he said he didn't. 140 police officers were beaten at the Capitol that day. Some with the American flag, several later died. And it wasn't just in there.
And the only ones,
hold Minnesota,
up,
a group gathered on the state capitol grounds.
No cop died that day from anything they sustained that day. There were some that committed suicide, and there's a reason, okay? Now, they're starting to uncover the truth about the matter, and I think once the truth comes out, you're going to realize that was a big setup, because like people like John Sullivan caught 7 felonies, Jaden X. He was a BLM member, Antifa member. He went to radicalize people and start a riot. He said it. It was all over Facebook. I mean, government probably hiding all that stuff again. But I was part of a lot of groups. Okay, I do a lot of research. I talk to a lot of people in a lot of different groups. Not necessarily people I always agree with. I want to, you keep your friends close and you keep your enemies closer, right? So if you think this group is harmful to you and your family, then you definitely want to be part of it so you can see what's going on and you can know, right? So I've done that, and I've seen where all these different BLM groups, Antifa groups, they all were going down January 6th to start a riot. They set it all over. So if the government couldn't find all the things that I've seen for, quite a while leading up to this, I think there's a problem there. Continue on.
In St. Paul, and said, we're marching to the governor's residence and there may be casualties. The only person there was my son and his dog, who was rushed out crying by state police. That issue, and Mike Pence standing there as they were chanting, hang Mike Pence. Mike Pence made the right decision. So, Senator, it was adjudicated over and over and over. I worked with kids long enough to know, and I said as a football coach, sometimes you really want to win, but the democracy is bigger than winning an election. You shake hands, and then you try and do everything you can to help the other side win. That's what was at stake here. Now, the thing I'm most concerned about is the idea that imprisoning your political opponents.
You want to know why he stuttered there? Because that's exactly what they're trying to do. Democrats are currently trying to go after their political opponents and imprison them. I mean, this is exactly why Donald Trump did not actually go after Hillary Clinton. Like when he was on his campaign, he's like, oh, because you'd be in jail, right? Everybody remembers that. But the problem is then we become a banana republic, and then everybody can go after their political opponents, lock them up, and we no longer have a constitutional republic with democratically elected officials, which is not even really democratically elected officials, because, our electoral system is not always the popular vote wins. It's not always like that. All right, continuing on.
Already laying the groundwork for people not accepting this. And a president's words matter. A president's words matter. People hear that. So I think this issue of settling our differences at the ballot box, shaking hands when we lose, being honest about it, but to deny what happened on January 6th, the first time in American history that a president or anyone tried to overturn a fair election and the peaceful transfer of power. And here we are 4 years later in the same boat. I will tell you this, that when this is over, we need to shake hands this election and the winner needs to be the winner. This has got to stop. It's tearing our country apart.
100%.
Margaret?
Senator Vance, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, well, look, Tim, first of all, it's really rich for Democratic leaders to say that Donald Trump is a unique threat to democracy when he peacefully gave over power on January the 20th, as we have done for 250 years in this country. We are going to shake hands after this debate and after this election. And of course, I hope that we win, and I think we're going to win. But if Tim Walz is the next vice president, he'll have my prayers, he'll have my best wishes, and he'll have my help whenever he wants it. But we have to remember that for years in this country, Democrats protested the results of elections. Hillary Clinton in 2016 said that Donald Trump had the election stolen by Vladimir Putin because the Russians bought like $500,000 worth of Facebook ads. This has been going on for a long time. And if we want to say that we need to respect the results of the election, I'm on board. But if we want to say, as Tim Walz is saying, that this is just a problem that Republicans have had, I don't buy that.
Governor.
January 6th was not Facebook ads. And I think a revisionist history on this. Look, I don't understand how we got to this point. But the issue was that happened. Donald Trump can do it. And all of us say there's no place for this. It has massive repercussions. This idea that there's censorship to stop people from threatening to kill someone, threatening to do something, that's not censorship. Censorship is book banning. We've seen that. We've seen that brought up. I just think for everyone tonight, and I'm going to thank Senator Vance. I think this is the conversation they want to hear. And I think there's a lot of agreement. But this is one that we are miles apart on. This was a threat to our democracy in a way that we had not seen. And it manifested itself because of Donald Trump's inability to say. He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Now, I'm going to say this. We just proved that illegals get registered in states. Accidents happen too, on top of bad intentions, but we've just proved that in a video earlier, and in my last live I proved where multiple people, illegal aliens, have been registered, have voted, and they've been convicted of it, but they still counted their vote. They didn't get convicted till 2 years later, a year later, right? So what he said right there is false, still following that narrative.
Election.
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
It's a damning non-answer for you to not talk about censorship. Obviously, Donald Trump and I think that there were problems in 2020. We've talked about it. I'm happy to talk about it further. But you guys attack us for not believing in democracy. The most sacred right under the United States democracy is the First Amendment. You yourself have said there's no First Amendment right to misinformation. Kamala Harris wants to use the power of government and big tech to silence people from speaking.
Hold on. Hate speech? Basically, you're saying, like, because you know there was some fraud committed, that's hate speech. Because you disagree and you want to check the election to see. I'm trying to understand how it's hate speech. Because, again, Hillary filed these lawsuits in 2016. Hillary did all the same stuff. She was like, oh, Donald Trump didn't really win. It's election interference by Russia. They investigated, found nothing. Okay. And nobody sat there. I mean, I guess some Republicans obviously sat there and was like, yeah, that's garbage. Right. And now here we are, the flip side. And okay. I don't know.
Their minds. That is a threat to democracy that will long outlive this present political moment. I would like Democrats and Republicans to both reject censorship. Let's persuade one another. Let's argue about ideas, and then let's come together afterwards.
You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. That's the test. That's the Supreme Court test.
Tim, fire in a crowded theater. You guys wanted to kick people off of Facebook for saying that toddlers shouldn't wear masks.
Senator, the governor does have the floor.
Fire in a crowded theater. That is criticizing the policies of the government, which is the right of every American.
Right. Senator, the governor does have the floor for 1 minute to respond to you.
Yeah.
We do. I'm just saying, like, we all have the right to question the government. We all have the right to say, I don't know if this election was on the up and up. There's nothing wrong with that. There was nothing in 2016 when Hillary wanted to do it. I mean, whatever. I don't agree. But hey. And again, Donald Trump, same thing. If he wanted to say, hey, I think there were some flaws here. And when they bring evidence, you can't just say, hey, that's no good. That's not, but like, you can accept evidence from one side and not the other. Like, no, you have to be unbiased. You have to be able to unpack both sides, right? And kind of listen.
Well, I don't run Facebook. What I do know is I see a candidate out there who refused, and now again, and this, I'm pretty shocked by this. He lost the election. This is not a debate. It's not anything anywhere other than in Donald Trump's world. Because look, when Mike Pence made that decision to certify that election, that's why Mike Pence isn't on this stage. What I'm concerned about is, where is the firewall with Donald Trump? Where is the firewall if he knows he could do anything, including taking an election, and his vice president's not going to stand to it? That's what we're asking you, America. Will you stand up? Will you keep your oath of office, even if the president doesn't? And I think Kamala Harris would agree. She wouldn't have picked me if she didn't think I would do that, because of course that's what we would do. So America, I think you've got a really clear choice on this election of who's going to honor that democracy and who's going to honor Donald Trump.
All right, a substantive civil debate, despite months of rather vicious and nasty attacks between Senators.
Yeah, to be honest, I thought it was a pretty good debate. They were polite. You know, they were pretty good with each other. You know, what do you think? You think that was a pretty good debate? Who do you think had the better talking points? All right, let's see. Well, yep, not a citizen in Arizona is getting registered to vote. Weird. I'm checking something real quick. Warning, your first violation, if less severe, will result in a warning. This provides you with an opportunity to better understand our community guidelines. One or more strikes. For repeated violations that are less severe, your account may face a ban. We'll notify you when you're nearing this point. For any severe content violations, your account will face an immediate ban on the first strike. Check account status. Warning, your first violation won't be counted as a strike and only serves as a warning. Multiple strikes may lead to account ban. Tap below to learn about our account policy. Learn more about our account policy and community guidelines. So tell me, because I was streaming on TikTok too, you know, what did I do that was against TikTok's account standards? I didn't smoke, I didn't drink, I didn't do anything. I was just watching the news. Is watching the news banned on TikTok? Are you not allowed to watch the news? Can somebody help me here? I want to see what my warning's about. Let's see. Live access removed. Your access to multi-guest will be restored October 9th. They said misinformation. Bro, I was watching the news. How is that misinformation? I'm appealing, obviously. I'm going to appeal. I watched the news, bro. I mean, I guess if the news is I guess it can be. I mean, I can't say that it's not, but I don't think you should remove somebody off of a platform because of they were watching the news. Because the news was spreading facts, right? They were telling you what's happening. Like, that wasn't you had misinformation. So questionable. And it won't even let me, like, I can't type out exactly anything. Like, it just says, oh, submit an appeal. So if I'm making an appeal, don't you think I'd be able to write out my appeal? Be like, hey, yeah, no, I didn't share any misinformation. I was sharing the news. You know, we watch this all the time. This is, you know, local news that said, hey, this is what's going on right now. We need an investigation. And no, they want to say it's misinformation. Your community guidelines, again, I understand what misinformation is. I understand what disinformation is. But see, look, it'll take 24 hours to appeal. Again, nothing, I didn't share any misinformation. I may have shared an opinion, you know, which that's just, my opinion is not considered misinformation because it's just an opinion I formed off of facts that I've seen. So I just don't like how they do that. You know, they were going to be like, oh. And this is why I think Americans need, we need to stand up and say, you know what? Our First Amendment right is not just saying that the government can't abridge it. It should be saying that you can't abridge our First Amendment right. Like, if you want to build a platform for kids, right, so you can't swear or say certain words, it's your prerogative. But if you have such a big platform, you should not be allowed to shut people up or silence people for things you don't like. Because again, they're using all these platforms, okay? They're using all these platforms to brainwash people, right? To make people believe what they want them to believe. So if they can say, hey, you watch the news and the news happened to say that this illegal, or he's not illegal, sorry, I cannot say that. He is illegal to be here, but he's not a citizen. But this non-citizen got registered to vote. They show you the factual data in the township that he didn't register himself, so I can't say he registered, but they registered him as it stated. So how is that sharing any type of misinformation? I mean, I'm at a loss with this one, you know? And when you try to appeal them, they don't allow you to type out your own appeal, right? Like, I would assume that if I'm going to appeal something, I should be able to say why I'm appealing. Instead, it just says, oh, click the appeal button, and then your appeal will go to review. And you got to wait 24 hours for an answer because we don't give a crap about you. We don't care about you. We just want your money. That's all we want. That's literally what they are. So you know what? Yeah, I'll flash that real quick. All right, what other news we got? What else are we watching? What other am I on? I'm not on there. Let's see. I'm only on. Oh, so now we're just down to Facebook. So we're just down to Facebook and YouTube because I'm kind of surprised Facebook lets me on here, to be honest with you, because I talk a lot of crap. And I guess I tend to lean a little more Republican. I mean, I never once in my life ever thought, but once I got down to facts and truth and realizing that, some of these, as a child, I had, I guess as a child, I lived kind of in a fantasy world like we all, growing up, it was a little bit different than a lot of people's, but it was like, I wanted to believe in certain things, and then, I got told that this is the party of this and this is the party of that. So I'm like, oh yeah, I'm for civil rights and I'm for equality. I am for civil rights and I am for equality. However, if you actually look at what is done, then you realize that the Democrats that are supposedly the party of civil rights snuck a lot of bad verbiage in some of this legislation, so you didn't get exactly what you thought you got when they signed the legislation, which is why it was opposed in certain areas. Now, I'm just going to say this. There was one party that was created for the reason of equality, period. The whole reason this party exists. And it's not the oldest running slave-owned party. It's not the oldest running slave owner party in existence right now. That is not the party. They lied to you. They basically treat you like crap. They think you're not good enough to, or you're not smart enough to get an ID. You're not smart enough to drive a car. You're not smart enough to graduate high school. You're not smart enough. That's what they think. That's why they say these laws are racist or, bad for minorities. And I'm like, look, pretty sure when this country started and they started the voting process, not everybody could vote, right? Women couldn't vote. If you didn't own 25 acres, you couldn't vote, blah, 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 blah. You had to be certain. And then we had to fight, right, to get where we wanted to be. And this country was an experiment in the start, right? It still is an experiment. And they keep saying democracy, democracy, democracy. But guys, wake up. It's not a democracy. It's a constitutional republic. Why are we not a democracy? What is a democracy? Majority rules, right? Where if a majority of people wanted to vote for something, they would get it, right? And the minorities, this would leave minorities in the worst position possible. Why? Because good luck being a minority and getting the majority on your side. It's not as easy. That's how life gets screwed up for a lot of people. All right. Now, what benefits is a constitutional republic? A constitutional republic has this document, it's called the Constitution, that gives everybody unalienable rights. It means I have the right to speech, religion, belief, practice, expression, right? I have the right to defense. I have the right to defend myself. I have the right to be in a group, which is a militia, a group to defend my state and my country. And I have the right to keep and bear arms. Notice it says shall not be infringed, right? Because the founding fathers knew that, look, how do you take over society? You take the guns from good people. Because guess what? If you make a law, you make all these laws, guess who follows the laws? The good law-abiding citizen. So you ban certain weapons. Do you think the criminals are going to just, okay, well, these guns are illegal, so, we're going to give them over now? You'd have to be just stupid, plain out stupid to believe that making a law restricting a law-abiding citizen is going to help anybody. You would have to be plain out stupid. There's no joke about it. There's nothing to say. And then, like, in this debate, I watched another part when they got into the gun violence conversation. Okay, there's a problem there. The problem is that guns are not the violence. Guns are inanimate objects. They do not walk out the door. They do not shoot somebody. You could leave a 12 gauge sitting on my table pointed at me all day. It ain't going to do nothing. It ain't going to do nothing. And Mr. Tim, Tampon Timmy here, wanted to sit here and say, oh, sometimes it is a gun problem. No, I'm sorry, you cannot blame an inanimate object for what people do, okay? And what I really respect J.D. Vance is he's telling you, he's like, no, we have a mental illness problem. We have a depression problem, okay? We have a social media problem. You know why? Because people post all these pictures of how great my life is. Oh, photo here, photo there. They're not showing you the arguments they're getting into. They're not showing you the fighting. They're not showing you the stress. They're not showing you all the work they have to do to get this 30 seconds of paradise, right? They don't show you none of that. So every time you get on Facebook, you see how great everybody has it. And you're like, man, wow, I'm just working my fingers to the bone. I'm fighting. Why can't I have that? And then you start taking things for granted. You start getting angry about stuff because you're like, man. And it puts you in a depressive state. I can tell you, I've been in that depressive state. I'm sitting here like, man, I've worked. I go out and do all these things. I fight and I fight and I fight. And I didn't get, man. I mean, okay, I got somewhere. It's not that I didn't get nowhere. It's just like I didn't get as far or, where I thought I would be. So, I felt a little depressed because I'm like, man, look at this. This guy I went to high school with, he's over here, riding around in a $100,000 truck and got a $250,000 house. And, I'm like, man, my house, I can't complain. You know, I got it pretty cheap, and it's worth, what, more than double what I paid for it. So, I mean, I can't really complain about that, but the point is the point, you know. It's not a $250,000 house, it's a $150,000 house. You know, I don't have a $100,000 truck. I got like a $5,000, well, it's not even a $5,000 truck, okay? So, but it's not bad, and I'm happy with it, but it does get depressing when you're watching all these people do great, but then you actually talk to them and you realize that they're not as happy as it looked like they were. They're not at all. They're actually getting divorced, and they just didn't put it out there, right? So it was pretty crazy. But I think that's what causes a lot of mental illness, is just people thinking other people have it so much better than them because they get to see all these photos on Facebook and Instagram and all these different social medias. Like, I'm probably getting shadow banned right now. I mean, I ain't got not many comments, so I'm not even sure if anybody's even watching anymore, because it never wants to tell me how many people are in here, if there's anybody in here, you know. And I'm cool with it. It's fine. I'm just on here ranting and talking crap. It's what I do. But again, I was just I got off subject there because my subject was about the guns and about gun violence. And Vance said that we needed, you know, I respected his opinion because he said we needed better security at the schools, right? And now take this, what Vivek Ramaswamy said. Vivek Ramaswamy said, if we got rid of the federal department, right, that takes up $80-some billion a year, and that money doesn't go to the school, that goes to the department for the buildings, for the wages of the people that work at the federal department and all that. And if we took that 84, I want to say, I'm pretty sure it was billion, so I'm just going to use that. If it's wrong, correct me, somebody put it in a comment, whatever. But it was like $84 billion. If we removed that department, then we could afford armed guards at every single school, and I can guarantee you it'd be a lot harder for a school shooting to happen. Now, we could take that money and we could protect our schools better, and we could offer better, what do you say, you know, mental support, better, more counseling. I'm not sure if counselors are that great at times too, because again, you get some of the counselors that are pretty crazy and tell your kids crazy things, and they can do this and they can do that, and it's like, okay, I love being supportive. I love my kids. I got 7 of them, okay? I love every one of them and I want to support them. But I'm telling you, you don't change your body till you're an adult. I've never met a kid in my entire life who grew up to be what he wanted to be right off rip. Like, I've met kids that grew up to be what they wanted to be after working hard and taking it, but they changed what they wanted, right? It changed a little bit. And most people I know completely changed what they wanted to be. They like, I wanted to grow up to be an NFL running back. I wanted to be a superstar. Nah, I'm not so much of a social person now. You know, I just, public can get on my nerves because too many people just think they're so much better than everybody else. It's like, wow, you got $1 in your pocket and you're better than me because I'm broke. Good job. Guess what? I'm happy. I got my kids. I'm a granddad. I'm only 38 years old. I'm a granddad, and I hang out with my grandbaby all the time. Love them. That's what makes me happy. Your $100,000 truck, that would be cool, that'd be fun, but it's not going to make me happy because I'm going to scratch it. It's going to piss me off. I'm going to get so mad when I scratch that $100,000 truck because I know I'm going to do it. That's why I stick with the $5,000 beater, because I'm going to scratch it, right? But what makes me happy is being able to hang out with my grandchild. What makes me happy is being able to do things with my kid, go out back and throw a football, you know, have a conversation, watch a video with them, you know. That's what makes me happy. Your money's not going to make me happy. I'm one of those people that's happy being broke. I really don't care. I mean, as long as the bills are paid and I got food, right? That's what matters. As long as these kids get the shoes and they get clothes and they get taken care of with what they need, you know, the extras, it's not that important. What's important is that I love every one of my kids, and I would take a bullet for every single kid I got. I would, 100%. But that's enough rambling for me. I didn't even get on any P. Diddy stuff here. But again, ain't nobody talking, so I'm gonna hop up off here. You guys have a good night.